Hi, this is Erica Merrill, and I am the founder of Perfect Legal Video, and I am very excited to bring to you today attorney Nicole Reeves Lavallee. We have not spoken to her in a couple of weeks. It has just been crazy busy, but I am so happy to have her here today because we're going to talk about a topic that is often on someone's mind when they are thinking about getting divorced, and that topic is alimony. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nicole.
Thank you, and hopefully we'll enjoy this topic as well.
We always enjoy your topics. So why don't we just start off with, like we normally do, with just defining what is alimony and why would you get it?
Alimony is basically support for an alternate person. So if you're the wife and you're making less money than the husband, you're going to get alimony, or you may be entitled to alimony based on discrepancy of income. So the first thing that they're going to do is look at what is each party making, how is it related in comparison to the other party, is there a discrepancy, is it something that we need to consider, and is there a money amount that we can give that party to kind of help them be more equal.
And what are the reasons that it wouldn't be equal? I mean, you and I both know, but just for the people out there, I mean, you're building a life with somebody, and sometimes people take the role of making the money, and sometimes people take the role of taking care of the household, and you can't always be equal. What would you say about that statement?
And I think that's the biggest thing. The reality is sometimes it's just education. One person has a PhD or a Juris Doctorate or an MD or something like that, and they're obviously a professional. They're making significantly more money, as they probably should, compared to somebody that maybe doesn't have an associate's degree or doesn't even have a bachelor's degree, or maybe they do, but their field is really in political science, and they don't want to do politics, and what do they do with that? So you have those varying degrees that really don't really amount to any background that you can actually use. So those are the types of situations. Again, you have somebody that is going to be a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad. They're going to take care of the children because their spouse makes significantly more, and that job is just as equally as important to the family household dynamic, but obviously there needs to be a give and take. Sometimes you just have people that aren't as skilled at doing those things. So whatever your skill level of, or whatever that amounts to, they're going to look at that and say, hey, there is a discrepancy. The real question is, has that discrepancy always existed? Is it something that just happened recently? Maybe that person ended up having a disability. Maybe they had a stroke and are no longer able to work. So there's a lot of different factors that come into play, but they're going to look at, is it something by that person's doing, or is it something as a result of nature or who they are as a person? And that's really going to govern whether or not somebody's entitled to alimony.
Wow, that's really interesting. Just on a side, and I know that you're not expecting this question, but I'm just curious. We did a dating tips from a divorce attorney earlier this year around Valentine's Day. And just on the dating spectrum and then the marrying spectrum, personality wise, I would think you often find somebody who is the hard driver that's out there doing a lot of the work and really would rather be doing the work than staying home and taking care of the kids. And sometimes that's the man that likes to stay home and take care of the kids. I actually know several fathers that have raised their kids, so this is not a sexist thing at all. I'm just curious if you have seen that is kind of what the dynamic is. Those personalities seem to attract each other.
I definitely think it has a lot of potential. There is sometimes that happens more often than not, and there's other times you kind of go, what? Why are these two people together? Because the opposites do attract. So I think you have some of that. I think a lot of it is, again, sometimes it's maybe, hey, and I hate to be sexist, but hey, maybe she's really hot. And I want her, but I don't really have that education. So it all depends on what attracts people, obviously. But it's very unusual, if you will, that both parties are making roughly the same amount of money. That generally doesn't happen. Usually one person is a breadwinner. Even if both parties are making substantial money, you're still going to have that one person that's making more money and contributing more to the household financially.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm sure that you have people that are working and they are contributing to the household. And it's because the other person is a drug addict or an alcoholic or something. And it's very sad when you come across that. But I mean, is that can be a situation? Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, you don't know what brings people there again. Sometimes it's just that you have that disability, whether it be a mental health disability, a physical or otherwise. But you have those things that are going to happen in a relationship, and they always happen. So the question is, how is it people are going to deal with it, and what impact that has? Because again, we're going to look at, does it have a financial impact? You know, maybe somebody is, say, look, was a stay-at-home parent, but their qualifications really is a minimum wage job and they've worked 20 hours a week. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We, like I said, have to look at both parties. I've seen people where people are on disability and have to pay alimony. So it's not always, you know, the person that can't work or is disabled is the one receiving it. It definitely varies from person to person, case by case.
Well, you know, that's very interesting. You know me, like I'm always taking interest in the relationship part of it because I love to know what makes people tick and how they end up together, and then, you know, what happens. It's like a chemistry project with some of these people. But what are some of the different types of alimony out there?
There are 4 types in Massachusetts, and there's general term alimony, there's rehabilitative alimony, there's reimbursement alimony, and there's transitional. Each one of them play a different role, and depends on which one you have as to what the duration is going to look like, what the amounts are going to look like. So they definitely have different functions, but we've kind of lumped them into the 4 different categories to make life easier, where we would actually define that in a separation agreement. We would say exactly which one you were getting, if it was general term or rehabilitative alimony.
So how long do people get alimony? How is that calculated?
Well, again, it goes back to those types of alimony. So we're going to look at the type. If it's a general term alimony, that is going to be the longest period of time, and that's going to be based on the length of the marriage. So what we take a look at is your date of marriage to your date of service of the defendant at the divorce. And we're going to look at that and we're going to say that is 350 months, whatever that magic number is. And then the formula is going to calculate it to basically be 2/3 of that. So if I use 330 to make my life easier, it's going to be 220 months. So that's basically how it would work in terms of the length. You also have the rehabilitative alimony, which is kind of more of a lump sum. It's a one and done. When can we make these payments? It is literally for that person to kind of get back on their feet over a period of time. Reimbursement alimony is exactly what it sounds like. So I'm reimbursing them. Generally, this comes into play when I've supported my spouse through medical school. And as soon as he got his residency, he dumped me. Okay, and as a result of that, I couldn't go to school and I couldn't finish my education because you were doing your stuff. So I need to get some kind of reimbursement for that. So it's going to be, how long do you need to get your education? Okay, 4 years, so we're going to look at it in something of that nature. And obviously I'm simplifying all of these things, but that's the general gist of it. And then transitional alimony is, I just need some time to get on my feet, a year or so, just so I can start paying my bills, because I know my education, I can get this job, but I need to have the experience and I need a little more time, and I just need to get some help right now. So it's more of a immediate system where I'm going to get this money for a short period of time so that I can get back on my feet and then I can support myself. So each one of them is going to have their own length of time, but again, it's going to start with that premise of date of marriage to date of service. And then we go from there and look at it and go, okay, so based on that, which one of these categories would apply, and which one should we be applying for this particular case based on the facts?
Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't realize that there were so many types of alimony, and it makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of different situations, and you do hear that a lot. One person puts somebody else through college, and then their career takes off, and they go for somebody younger and hotter, um, whatever the case might be. So that's definitely very interesting. Let me see here. Hold on a second. All right. So, are there cases where alimony can be terminated early? I mean, you always hear about somebody has alimony and then they meet someone and they get married and then their alimony gets canceled. I mean, that's what you hear in the movies. Is that true in real life?
Well, there was a lot of people there that were not named. So I guess I would need a little more clarification. So if the husband is paying the alimony, and if he remarries, we don't care. Alimony will not stop. If wife is the recipient of the alimony and wife gets remarried, then yes, it would stop. So there are certain criteria. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to either look at the statute or we're going to look at your separation agreement. Obviously, your separation agreement is going to dictate what it actually is. If we don't have any of those terms defined in the separation agreement, then we're going to go to the statute, and the law is going to dictate when alimony should terminate. But basically, the gist of it is when either party dies, when the recipient, so in this fact that I just gave you, the wife was the recipient. So if the wife cohabitated with somebody else for more than 3 months, then it would terminate, or may terminate, I should say may. So those are options. Again, if there's a change in circumstances, if somebody has reached natural age of retirement, then it may terminate. So these are all triggering events. The only ones that obviously are mandatory is really marriage. And there might be some very nominal exceptions to that, but obviously death. And usually what happens in that case is, again, we kind of anticipate something. So there might be a life insurance policy that the payor is responsible for having until such time that the alimony should naturally terminate, regardless of his death.
I speak in general terms because I just hear so many different stories and I don't want to pinpoint one out of the other. But, I definitely have heard of that where somebody has moved in with somebody else and it affected their monthly payment, whether it was, I think it was the alimony payment, obviously, but they weren't getting their child support either. So the whole situation was terrible. But yeah, I mean, so that's very interesting. So make sure, and this is where I love to tell people, make sure that if you have questions about this, if you are thinking about a divorce, going through a divorce, maybe your divorce is over and you're thinking about moving in with somebody or getting married again, make sure that you know what the consequences are and pick up the phone and give Nicole Reeves Lavallee's office a call. They are understanding. They know everything that's happening with the laws today, and they can give you the best strategy for the best outcome. And so with that being said, I just love to give that because, I'm one of your clients and I think you're fantastic. So once you know that you're getting divorced and I guess you start going through the process, when do you get alimony?
You can get it really at any time. So obviously you have to be going through a divorce or a separation, a legal separation. If you're not married to that person, you're never going to get alimony, just saying. So assuming you're going through some kind of legal separation or a divorce, then you can seek it. You can seek it on a temporary basis, which would be as soon as, your case starts, you can ask for temporary alimony, or obviously it can be ordered at any point in time during the divorce or separation process, as well as at the conclusion of the divorce hearing. So it can vary as to when it starts, and it can vary as to whether or not any of that alimony given immediately is going to be calculated in terms of the overall duration, or if it's going to be separate and apart and the calculation is going to start at the time of the actual divorce itself.
Wow. Okay. So that's really good to know. And there's another factor that I'd like to talk about, and that is that a lot of people have children. They get married to have kids. What happens to your alimony if you're getting child support?
Great question. It's one of those things that it all depends. I know attorneys are famous in saying it depends, but unfortunately, this is really one of those categories where it really does depend. So the court is going to calculate your child support and determine an amount. The court will look at your alimony formula and give it that amount. I will say this, that the guidelines that were drafted back in 2011 on the alimony really do not apply as much today as they did back then. There's been changes in the law that really affected this. So while on paper it will say 30 to 35%, the reality is what all the attorneys are doing and the judges are doing is somewhere between 24 and 27%. Just so you know, so when I'm talking about plugging the numbers in, I'm actually talking about that lower number right now, even though the formula will give you a higher number. That being said, basically what's going to end up happening is we run the calculations on alimony and we say, for example, your alimony award would be $200 a week. And then we look at your child support award, and your child support award is $250 a week. Well, just using those simple examples, I'm going to tell you, you're not going to get both. You're only going to get the child support, so you're going to get an extra $50 a week as if you ran the alimony guidelines. Now, we use that exact same scenario, and your alimony award is $450 a week, and your child support award is $300 a week. Well, then you may very well get $150 extra in alimony and still get that $300 in child support. So it really depends on the circumstances and the amount of those numbers. So it really is a case-by-case basis.
And the last question, because I know in a few months people are going to be thinking about their taxes, is alimony tax deductible?
It is not. And a lot of people may be shocked to hear that because it used to be. And again, when Donald Trump came into office, he did something, changed the tax laws, and I don't even want to get into what he did. But bottom line is he signed something that basically said this is not taxable and it is not deductible. So basically it goes along the same lines as child support. It's kind of free found money for the recipient. Yay, I've got an extra $500 a week in my pocket just for being me, whether it be I'm a parent or I'm giving this spousal support. The same thing. So that's one of the reasons why I said when we're doing the calculations, that first number says 30 to 35%. We don't use that anymore. We use the lower number because we're making up for that tax break that they're not getting anymore. We have to give it back to them somewhere. So that's why it goes from 24 to 27% ish right now versus the 30 to 35 that is on the form.
I see. So they did make up for it. So it's not like one party is going to have to pay taxes and ends up paying a lot more than they would have paid before the change came in the tax law.
It definitely gives them some type of credit. I mean, obviously, if you're really ambitious, and you probably should anyways, is you should consult with a CPA so we can figure out exactly what those numbers are. Because again, we still got a 3% that we're looking at. Where do we fall in that spectrum? Maybe it's even a lower number than that, but we need to know what those numbers are and how it affects the party. So we are giving them a little bit of a tax break from the payor's perspective. But again, it's still free found money from the recipient's perspective. So, you have to weigh those. And we're, obviously the courts aren't looking to screw either parent. They're just trying to do what's best for this family and this, these two parties. So they really did take that into consideration. But at the end of the day, if you don't have an expert on the stand to testify as to what that amount is, that's most likely what the judge is going to do.
Okay, well, I think that's really great information to know. And I think certainly for anyone considering getting divorced or going through it right now, it's important information for you and your future, whether you're the recipient or whether you're the person paying the alimony. And so at this time, I'd love to ask you, do you have anything else you'd like to tell us, any stories you'd like to share on this particular topic? Because your stories are always the best, but I understand if you didn't prepare any.
I think the biggest thing to take away is that alimony is time specific. So it's something that you really need to understand when you're going through that divorce process. you need to understand what rights you're giving up, because in every separation agreement, excuse me, in any separation agreement, we're going to have language in there that says whether or not certain provisions merge or survive. And that's a very crucial thing when it comes to alimony, because sometimes I have had people come to me after their divorce and it says that alimony survives and they waive future alimony. So I have to tell them, there's nothing I can do. You're not entitled to it. Well, why not? Because this is what you signed. Well, I didn't know what I signed. Well, unfortunately, guess what? Again, time specific. We need to do that beforehand. So you really need to understand what your rights are. You need to understand whether you're going to be waiving future alimony, and that really means future. That means for the rest of your life, to this individual, you cannot go back and seek it. Versus, hey, maybe I'm only waiving past and present alimony, and if circumstances change, and if my circumstances get worse, or if the kids are emancipated, then maybe I need to go back in and ask for alimony. So those are the things that you need to consider. So it's certainly something that you want to be very specific. You want to ask your attorney specific questions about this. You want to understand what your rights are and what rights you're giving up. I think that's the most crucial thing that I could tell people.
Well, I think that that's very sage advice, and we certainly appreciate your taking the time to speak with us today, Nicole, as always. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we are looking forward to talking to you next week.
Thank you.